Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. This is Nephilim VA bringing you the second chapter of Our Painted Stages Fall Apart by Scenes, which is written by Silverheart SP on AO3. This fanfiction is an emotional rollercoaster of a wump, so I'll prepare you in advance with the trigger warnings. This fanfiction is for general audiences with themes of fluff and angst, near-death experiences, and canon-typical violence. Also, be aware of slight manga spoilers. If that isn't your style, then I recommend a real James Bond type, which is written by Hybrid Empress on AO3. It can be found on my channel! Brace yourselves, everybody. Now I implore you to sit back and relax whilst I read to you. Chapter 2. I feel the shadows hanging over. Deku! Deku! Izuku woke up to someone tapping his cheek harshly. Come on, you fucking nerd, wake the fuck up! A flash of orange light briefly flared up behind his eyelids, along with a vague banging or popping noise and the smell of smoke. He let out a groan. What the hell had just happened? The voice above him silenced suddenly, and the rhythmic tapping ceased. His head throbbed. Trying to remember sent a sharp ache of pain through his head. He took in several deep breaths. The air was dusty and foul, but he needed it so much. He felt as if his chest deliberately wasn't taking in enough. He needed to think. This morning, what had he done this morning to lead him to this predicament? A sudden memory came to him, signing out with a group of friends and talking to his teacher. Oh, that's right, the museum. He and his friends had gone there, and he had been really excited. Images flashed through his mind. The All Might exhibit. Bakugo coming to join him. Leaving to meet back up. Then nothing. Nothing except residual terror for Bakugo. He began to breathe heavily. Was Bakugo? No, he was fine. It was definitely Bakugo who had just been talking to him. Are you awake, nerd? Came Bakugo's voice as if to affirm his train of thought. Yeah, Izuku managed. His mouth felt dry and dirty, and it hurt his throat to talk. He felt like he had been directly breathing in dirt and grime. Darkness oppressed him from all sides, and he cracked open his eyes. It made no difference. The scene remained completely void, the blackness so thick it was nearly suffocating, and giving him some odd form of vertigo. He couldn't see his friend. He couldn't see where they were. It was complete pitch blackness. Without warning, another banging sound let off, this time closer to his ears. The surroundings were briefly flooded with a familiar orange light. The sudden change was blinding, forcing him to shut his eyes quickly again before he could get a look at the scene. He let out a weak noise of protest as green spots danced behind his eyelids, and he felt the throbbing in his head deepen. Good! Came a grunt from close by. He heard shifting and a crumbling noise which must have come from gravel on the ground. A heavy hand harshly came to rest on his shoulder. Instinctively, Izuku tried to shift himself to accommodate his friend. He moved his torso. Pain, white hot and burning, crackled through his being. It felt molten and unbearable, white stars popping in his vision. He let out a hoarse shout despite the darkness. He felt his world tilt. His stomach roiled. Pick up, Deku! It came back to him slowly this time. Somebody, Bakugo, was yelling close by him, and it was making his head throb and pound. Lethargy pulled at him. He was tired. Come on, you useless nerd, what the hell? Ka-chan? Said Izuku slowly. The voice stopped, and Izuku heard some shuffling. You're awake again? Said Bakugo's gruff and hoarse voice. You just fucking screamed really loudly, then didn't answer me. Yeah, whimpered Izuku.
What was that about?
Hissed Bakugo harshly. It was disconcerting hearing him so close, but being unable to see anything at all. Izuku winced at the memory of the pain. It had been bad enough that he had briefly blacked out again. Now that he was thinking about it, he trailed off. I think there's something wrong.
No shit,
snorted Bakugo. No, I mean, gasped Izuku. It was an effort to talk, exhaustion pulling at him. My side, I think. He quickly snapped his eyes shut again as Bakugo let off another weak explosion. It was close enough to Izuku that he could feel the heat radiating off it, and he saw the orange flash again through his closed eyes. Muttered expletives filled the absolute silence as the brief light disappeared. Bakugo did it again, and the resulting noise dug into Izuku's throbbing head and made him groan in protest.
You're impaled on fucking rebar, Deku,
muttered Bakugo. Oh, well, that made sense. It would explain why he currently felt hot and cold rushing through him at the same time, and why nausea rolled through him in waves. His side burned. Is it bleeding? He asked, concerned. If it was bleeding, he had a problem. A bigger problem, that is. Bakugo set off another explosion for light, and Izuku winced and jerked his head away.
A little bit,
said Bakugo, his voice low.
As long as you don't fucking move again, you'll be fine,
he finished, his voice dangerous. That was good. If it wasn't bleeding too much, it probably hadn't hit anything vital. As long as the rebar wasn't removed, he wouldn't bleed out. He could deal with the pain, as long as he didn't move again, like Bakugo said. Izuku didn't reply. Based on his earlier feelings, the rebar or something had been heading for Bakugo. If Izuku had been slower, it would have been Bakugo incapacitated right now. He was glad he had been fast enough, but... Ka-chan? He struggled out. He carefully made sure not to move, the memory of the pain making him hyper-aware. You...
I'm fine, moron,
snarled Bakugo. Izuku winced at the close proximity of the voice to his ears.
Because you thought I was fucking blind or something. I could take care of myself, you shit stain,
he finished, and Izuku felt irrational guilt seep through him. Deciding to ignore that strain of thought right now, he made a vague, strangled noise of affirmation. Where are the others? Izuku struggled to get out. He felt breathless, and the pounding in his head made it incredibly hard to concentrate on talking. He was so tired.
Why would you think I know, Deku?
Demanded Bakugo.
Probably still upstairs being the shit out of whatever villain fucking decided to blow up the museum.
He muttered the last part, the situation suddenly dawning on both of them. It had been so sudden, there had been no indication of what was to come. How many people were currently trapped like they were? Were their friends okay? Izuku and Bakugo were in the basement. Hopefully their friends had been on the ground floor and were faring better. How long had he been out? That last one, Bakugo could thankfully help answer. How long have we been here? He asked hoarsely.
Shut up, Deku,
replied Bakugo reflexively. Silence filled the space. Paired with the absolute darkness, Izuku felt like he was suffocating, buried alive in an early grave. He took in another deep breath, his lungs rattling with the dust and dirt.
Not sure,
finally grunted Bakugo after a few more seconds. Izuku tuned in to where his voice was coming from.
I got knocked out as well. Your ass was out for longer than me, though, he finished.
That made sense, considering. The thought of the metal bar currently protruding from his side made it throb and burn harder, joining his head in a cacophony of pain and discomfort. Ah, his head. that had been bothering him. He knew the signs of a concussion: headache, confusion, nausea, dizziness. He was checking them off. Karchan, I think I have a concussion, he stuttered weakly. That got Bakugo's attention. Izuku heard more movement and felt Bakugo's invisible presence in the darkness lean over him.
Yeah, you got clocked on the head pretty fucking hard by a chunk of ceiling,
he said. Izuku groaned. This time Bakugo muttered a warning before letting off another weak explosion. Izuku screwed his eyes shut as light briefly flashed behind his eyelids, succeeded by a few more. Bakugo was moving around, the sounds of the explosions paired with the shifting, rattling around in his throbbing head. The painful assault on his senses kept him awake at the very least. He knew it was important to stay awake. There was no way for them to check how bad his concussion was without a steady source of light. The normal procedure would be to check his pupil dilation, but that was off the table. There was nothing they could do about it for now.
Don't fucking pass out again, nerd,
said Bakugo gruffly, echoing Izuku's earlier thoughts. Izuku could only manage a hum of affirmation, his breathing heavy and panting. Something nagged at him. Through the numbing pain on his side, he thought he could feel the wetness of blood. Karchan? He managed. Bandage? To wrap his side. Izuku felt Bakugo's rough hand come to rest against his chest, more hesitantly this time. Izuku was careful not to move as the hand slowly moved downwards, getting closer to the burning white pain of his injury.
Don't fucking have any,
said Bakugo, lifting his hand up. It was almost as if he had been afraid to get any closer. Izuku wouldn't muss up the strength to reply. He hoped they could get out before that became a problem. Oh God. How were they going to get out? How was Izuku going to get out? The thought came clearly to him, more clearly than anything else since he had first woken up. His heart pounded against his ribcage, and he let out another heavy breath. Izuku was immobile. As much as he wanted to, he wouldn't be able to help in finding an exit or digging a way out. Bakugo would probably be able to dig around. He had said he was okay after all, though it's not as if he would admit weakness. Izuku wondered if he had been lying. Either way, Izuku was useless. Bakugo was their only hope of finding a way out before rescue, probably by digging. It would be dangerous to use his explosions, too much risk of a collapse. It would be a long, hard process, and even if Bakugo did manage to dig an exit, Izuku currently could not think of any way he would be able to leave alongside his friend. Just the thought of moving made him feel sick. Okay, he could feel himself begin to panic. That was not a good idea. One thing at a time. First, Bakugo had to dig an exit. Then they could worry about moving Izuku. Bakugo could just go and get someone else to help. He took a few deep, rattling breaths, managing to slow his heart rate. That small bout of panic had been exhausting. The silence stretched on, and Izuku struggled to keep his eyes open in the oppressing, thick darkness.
Oi!
Suddenly came Bakugo's voice, still close above him.
What did I say before, nerd?
Izuku grunted. To stay awake, he said with effort. How had Bakugo known?
You're usually much chattier, said Bakugo. It's fucking annoying.
Izuku realized he had said that out loud, but he supposed it was for the best. Maybe Bakugo was right and talking would be a good way to keep him awake. How, he tried, his breath heavy in his lungs, how big is the space we're in? Bakugo didn't say anything, but Izuku felt and heard more movement. The presence above and beside him soon disappeared, and when Bakugo spoke, it was from further away.
A few meters long,
he informed, his voice sounding hoarse.
If I stretch my arms out, I can touch either end of the wall. Fucking great, he hissed. I can't stand up. The ceiling's too low,
he continued, sounding annoyed. Izuku could relate. That wasn't a very big space at all. Slowly, another thought wormed its way into his hazed mind. Ka-chan? He began again, breathily. He heard a grunt from the other end of the space. How much oxygen do you think we have? Silence. Bakugo didn't reply. Toshinori had been looking forward to a relaxing weekend. With young Izuku occupied with his friends at the museum, Toshinori had the day somewhat to himself. He and his young successor would often spend weekend afternoons, catching up and discussing One for All, sometimes joined by young Bakugo. At first, Toshinori hadn't been very thrilled about someone else, especially a student, being privy to his greatest secret, but he had found, with time, that having someone else around to add input was probably good for both him and Izuku. Perhaps Bakugo's manner could be improved, but it was something. And so, with the absence of both of his students, he had organized for today to have lunch with his old friend, Naomasa Tsukauchi. He knew Izuku wanted to get to the museum quickly, so he didn't get a chance to see him and his friends off before they left. And so Toshinori hadn't seen his student all day when he arrived at the pub that he and Tsukauchi were eating at, stepping out of the pouring rain. "How have you been, Toshi?" asked Tsukauchi as Toshinori sat down. "I hope you're treating yourself well." "Oh, you know," said Toshinori, settling into his seat. Tsukauchi waved over a waiter, who handed them a lunch menu each. "As well as I can be," he trailed off. Truthfully, he had been feeling his injury more lately. Sometimes he woke up in pain, sometimes he could barely eat. He thought it might finally be the exhaustion of being the #1 hero for so many years catching up to him. He endured it, though. Izuku needed him. "I'm glad to hear that," smiled Tsukauchi. "I've checked, and this place has food that should be safe for you to eat, so don't worry about anything like that, okay?" Toshinori nodded, opening the menu. He let the ambience of the pub surround him, the sound of the news playing on the television hanging above them, the sound of other chattering patrons and the clinking coming from the bar. It was nice to go out and not be recognized instantly, despite people knowing both his forms now. Toshinori and Tsukauchi chatted easily with each other as they examined their menus, catching up and discussing the most recent happenings in each other's lives. As they talked, Toshinori found himself often veering the conversation in the direction of his young successor. Tsukauchi was one of the few people who knew the entire story behind him and Izuku, and so Toshinori was able to talk freely about his progress. Toshinori was so proud of him. He couldn't be prouder. Izuku had come so far from those first few months on the beach. Now, whenever Toshinori saw him, he not only saw the sweet, kind, intelligent boy he had first gotten to know, but he also saw a budding professional hero. Izuku was going to be the next symbol of peace, and it couldn't be clearer to Toshinori's weathered eyes. His boy had come so far. He was so proud. "It's so great to hear you're both doing so well," said Tsukauchi as their food arrived. "I take it Izuku's gotten better with his quirk, then?" "Oh yes, miles better," affirmed Toshinori, raising his fork to begin eating. "He's recently discovered that he's able to access quirks of past users, that is. Apparently the stockpiling aspect wasn't limited to just power, but rather everything about the user." Suddenly, and without warning, the television that had been playing quiet sideline reports blared with the theme for more urgent news. Toshinori was cut off from speaking, his fork raised halfway to his mouth. He and Tsukauchi exchanged a look. That was odd. The general reports were rarely interrupted. They both came to the silent agreement and turned their attention onto the television. "Breaking news," said the grave-looking reporter. A report has just come in that Musatafu Museum has been attacked on a radical scale by villains. Toshinori's eyes widened. The footage switched from the newsroom and reporter to what looked like a helicopter view of the museum's much-anticipated hero exhibition was the target of the attack. It's been mostly destroyed by unidentified detonation devices. It is unknown who the villain or villains are or their motivations. The footage was focused on the area in question. A large chunk of the museum had been utterly destroyed, reduced to nothing but rubble. The rain made the scene look more somber and dangerous. In the wreckage, Toshinori saw what he thought looked like. It was a large banner of him, or rather of All Might. He remembered having seen it hanging up near the entrance to every exhibition he knew Izuku and his friends had gone to that morning. His students. Izuku. Toshinori felt a dropping sensation where his stomach once was. He felt sick. His heart pounded against his ribcage. He quickly stood up, still staring at the television, his palms shaking against the table. All other individuals in the museum have been evacuated. Heroes and other authorized personnel are currently on the scene to begin the rescue effort, but it is estimated that over 200 individuals were caught in the blasts, so it is unknown how long it will take. Toshinori. He heard a sharp voice call. Numbly, he looked over to his friend. It's terrible, but there's nothing you can do, said Tsukauchi, his voice softer. I know you want to... No, said Toshinori, because Tsukauchi had gravely misunderstood the importance of the situation. Izuku and a group of his friends were in that museum, he said hoarsely. Tsukauchi's eyes widened. The two of them reached the police station in record time. Toshinori's heart remained in his mouth, and as they drove, all he could think about was Izuku and his other students. He made sure Tsukauchi had all their names, not just Izuku's. Had they made it out? Were they safe? The thought that they weren't horrified him so much he felt sick. No time. He and Tsukauchi had come to the station to obtain the names of all of those who had been evacuated. Hopefully, Izuku and the others were just fine and Toshinori would be able to see him again soon and hug him tightly. Stay here, said Tsukauchi as Toshinori made to leave the car. I'll be back with an update for you. Toshinori nodded numbly, sitting back down in his seat. Tsukauchi shut the door harshly and took off in a power walk, causing the door to slam a bit. The resounding silence, filled with the harsh pattering of rain on the car roof, swirled, and Toshinori was left with his thoughts. Oh God, he, as a veteran hero, had seen many similar-looking disaster zones. He knew the possibilities of becoming severely injured or... No. Toshinori couldn't think about that. His students would be fine. Izuku would be fine. An image flashed through his mind. Izuku, his eyes dead and lifeless, lying crushed underneath some rubble. Toshinori lifting it to find him. No. Toshinori wrung his fingers together and glanced out the rain-spattered window. Tsukauchi was out of sight, having entered the police station to obtain the report of all of those who had been evacuated. After that, he would have to go to the school and talk to Nezu and Aizawa to make sure they knew the situation. Maybe he could convince someone to let him help with the rescue efforts. It wouldn't matter if they were all safe. He would still keep that train of thought. They would all be fine. Even if the attacks had been directed at the exhibition Izuku and his friends were at, it made sense because of course villains would want to prevent knowledge of heroes spreading. Toshinori took a deep breath and his eyes closed. In, out. When this was over, he wouldn't be surprised if several years were taken off his lifespan. He had to trust that his students would be okay. Any minute now, he would get a call from Aizawa or someone, letting him know not to worry. He would go to the school and see his students and successor immediately. Toshinori was stuck like that for a while, his mind constantly rushing to worst-case scenarios. He had to keep pulling himself out of them. No use worrying until Sukauchi came back. Even then, being frantic wouldn't help anybody. He sat up straighter when he heard movement, and the driver's door opened. Toshinori quickly turned to his friend, who had a grave face. "I'm so sorry, Toshinori," he said, his eyes brimming with worry. "I couldn't find any of your students under record for having been evacuated." Toshinori's breath hitched. His mouth went dry. "I suppose we should alert the school then," he said quietly. Sukauchi nodded. The drive to the dormitories was silent. Toshinori's mind raced. He felt physically sick thinking about his students, about Izuku. They must be cold and wet with this rain. They must be scared. They might be injured, and Toshinori could do nothing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. All the emotions all at once, a roller coaster and a catharsis that I needed, and as usual, a pleasure to read. With it being August 1st, I welcome you all to the new month and wish you all the best. If you are celebrating Lammas, I hope you have a wonderful day. All credits go to the original creator of this fanfiction, Silverheart SP on AO3. I would highly appreciate it if you gave this video a like and you subscribe to the channel and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep growing my sunflowers. Mwah.